Welcome to the Your Talent Matters podcast, where we delve into the world of human resources and employee benefits in Canada. Join hosts Mehdi Rahman, a strategic human resources consultant, and Nick Godfrey, a seasoned employee benefits advisor, as they explore the many challenges that businesses face in attracting, developing, and engaging top talent. So sit back, relax, and learn from the experts on how your talent matters when it comes to growing a business.
Hi, welcome to Your Talent Matters. It's Nick Godfrey here once again with my partner in crime, Mehdi Rahman. Hey, Mehdi, Happy New Year, everyone. We're happy to be here today, and we're particularly excited to have Jeffrey Stinchcomb. He's a partner at People Corp. We're going to let Jeffrey tell his story, but today we're really going to talk about something called third-party administration for your employee benefits plan. Jeffrey's the expert, so we're going to learn a lot. So we're going to turn it over to Mehdi just to say anything new or exciting we need to be worrying about this year.
Well, I mean, there's a lot. Everybody is talking about costs, right? And I think in our last podcast, we talked a little bit about how organizations are spending money and, they have to look to be maybe frugal or parsimonious and like really understand where their costs are and get the best value out of that. And that's why I'm so excited about today, where we know that a lot of our folks that are listening, they have their small businesses, they're already paying into something, but are they getting the best value? And so I think the theme of the year is just getting more out of what we currently spend, and again, this is a good topic for that.
Exactly. What I would just point out is that I did attend a webinar that Jeffrey put on a couple of months ago where he talked about this. And I think the thing that really resonated for me was the way he put benefits and buying insurance products was, well, you don't do all your shopping at Longo's, right? Or you don't do all your shopping so if there's a great deal at another store, you go there. And if there's and you have the ability of being able to shop around and get the best value and lock in your prices. And I thought that really struck home for me because a lot of organizations are stuck with one insurance company, and the third-party administration model certainly answers that problem. Wouldn't you say? Over to you, Jeff.
Yes.
Good answer.
Jeffrey, tell us a little bit about yourself. You're also from Ontario, like all of us. Tell us just a little bit about your background.
Yeah, I'm a partner at People Corporation. I was there from the very beginning. Today we have some 2,600 employees focused on employee benefits, retirement, and wellness, exclusively in Canada. We're by far the biggest. We have offices in every city, and my practice sort of spans most provinces. So I find myself in Vancouver and the East Coast and sometimes in Central Canada. And what I find are regional differences that are quite interesting. But what I found really interesting through COVID was how the Canadian employer community really rallied for their employees. It was really, really impressive. They weren't saying, what can we cut? They were saying, what can we add? How can we help our employees? And that just made me an even more proud Canadian.
Well, people I remember asked me during COVID, they say, well, how's business? And I say, well, there's nothing like a pandemic to get people thinking about their health insurance. So business was good. And yes, I remember they did, cut premiums to people so that they could give them a bit of a premium holiday, which was nice of them, so that they were willing to, all in. So that was very helpful.
And I'll hook on, Jeffrey, your point, and Nick, like your observation about like in some of the startups that I'm operating or I'm part of and working with, we are constantly scouring the market to see what else can we do for our people, not only for our existing employees so that we can retain them, but for new employees to attract them. And so we're like looking at what other competitors are doing, like business-wise, and then figuring out like, well, what benefits are they offering and how can we be an employer of choice? So I'm equally proud to see that in a lot of the like tech startups or small and medium-sized enterprises, is that they're looking to see what else can we do for our people.
That's pretty common.
Yeah.
How would you say that a TPA, if we had sort of the top three features, if you will, of a TPA over a Canada Life or a Sun Life, sort of a major insurance company?
Yeah, loaded question, Nick.
There you go.
Well, let me step back for a second because I love that question and I'm definitely going to answer it in full. And when Nick, I know you're really successful in the group benefits market, and so have I been. And I really thought deeply about it when I was asked to give that webinar that you were at. Like, how did that happen? And what I realized was it was always about putting the client interests first. And so when I think about any group benefits, paradigm, I've identified sort of there's three interests, all right, and only three. And so essentially, you've got the perspective of finance, the perspective of HR, and the perspective of the employees themselves. And so finance wants to know, how can I get the most value? Am I being taken advantage of? They're really interested in stability, cost control, right? And then on the HR side, they need the tools to be able to recruit, reward, and retain good people, right? So they want to be benefits competitive, and they want to make sure that the benefit strategy is serving the HR strategy, which is serving the business strategy, which is something Mehdi and I talked about earlier. And so, and then finally, we have the employee interests. And of course, we're all entitled Canadians. We want our snowmobiles covered, right? And so what I found in this sort of traditional distribution market was oftentimes the plan would only serve one of those interests. You might meet a finance person who's like, well, of course we have our employees pay 80% of the premium. And they love that, right? But that doesn't serve HR's interest. It doesn't serve the employees. On the other side, we might have an HR person who's screaming for wellness, but the finance side is saying, well, what's the return on investment? And then the employees, of course, we want everything covered, and we get upset when there's a copay, a deductible, or it's not covered. And so what I realized over time was I developed a practice that figured out how to align the interests of all three parties. And when I did that, it was almost like a magic key. My practice just exploded because I would have all three in the room at the same time, and I'd be showing them ways to align the interests of all three to serve the business strategy. And once I sort of took that management consulting hat and put that on, that's when I sort of differentiated myself. And guess what? It turned out that in aligning those interests, we found that the third-party administrative solution was almost always in the best interest of the buyer, and the buyer is the employer, and the employer consists of the HR, the finance, and the employees. And so in that way, I became a super TPA centric. And it's against my religion to put a client with one insurer.
I love it. I'll just say like what I love about it, and I'm not like, I mean, it could sound like we're biased because we're all in the same kind of room together.
Right.
But as a business person, and then as a person in the room with a CEO, with a CFO, or an operator, that's looking at their profit and loss statement every single month, and then also like having this employee kind of like talking and asking for things. Like, I love that Venn diagram. You created a Venn diagram in my head.
Yep.
That says like, like all three people can get what they want. There you go. Yeah, all three groups can get what they want. And like, I always think about Richard Branson's quote, like, if you take care of your employees, they'll take care of their customers, right? And that's what we're trying to do. Even if you're a finance person, you're still trying to take care of your people, because at the end of the day, they're the ones helping us pay the bills of this business.
Absolutely. I've actually been to his house, and he told me that directly.
Crazy.
Wow. Okay. Well, that's another podcast, right?
So when you're talking about to any buyer, I don't care what size, and I know, Nick, you guys are focused for the purpose of this conversation in what we call the small to medium market, defined as sort of small being like under 100 employees and medium being 100 to 500.
Yeah.
And so
Yes.
for me, I'm agnostic to employer size, because what I found is that I call it the best practices of employee benefits, are applicable to any size. And so if we think about it, if we've got a small group, right, why wouldn't we build our foundation as if we were huge already? And what that creates is, and Mehdi would love this, it's an opportunity for scalability. why build a shed when we can build the foundation for a large building? And so when I think about best practices, and I've got a list which we'll go through, but the concepts kind of come around the concept of good governance and the adoption of these best practices, sound risk management, the alignment of all three interests that I talked about earlier, stability of cost over time, a streamlined procurement strategy, and then finally wellness optimization. And so if we think about that, and let's say I got 25 employees, but I'm a startup with a VC, I'm on a about to raise capital, or maybe I'm already have raised capital. I'm picturing this firm as if it's already 500 employees, and how can we build that foundation so that we don't have to redo it later on, right?
Yeah.
And so yeah, I'm agnostic to the size of groups.
One of the things I like about the TPA model, and you touched on one of them, is price stability, that you're able to negotiate certain parts of the plan with a different insurer and just, shop around and get the best deal. Because one of the big issues with organizations is budget and predictability, knowing that they're, okay, here's this line item, we can live with that. Now let's go out and build our business. I think that's really important and strikes a chord with the finance people.
So Nick, you would know, let's talk for a moment about the interests of the finance person, right? If you can come into a finance person and show them cost neutrality and cost stability year over year, as opposed to maybe a -10 this year and a +10 next year and a -10 this year and a +10, I find cost neutrality is something that they seek, and cost assurance. And so I like that idea of having sort of a straight line flight. And then if we can create through best practice number one, which is funding models, if we can create sort of a surplus where we used to contribute, let's say X dollars to the insurer every year, but now by moving perhaps to administrative services only, we can keep a whole bunch of money and then plow that back into the program. So the CFO's got cost neutrality year over year. The HR team is being responsive to the employees' requests because they all want more vision or higher spending accounts. We're aligning interests by applying these best practices. So CFOs aren't necessarily in Canada seeking cost cutting. They're seeking cost containment, cost neutrality, cost stability. And HR would like to use those same store dollars to reinvest into the plan to help them recruit, reward, and retain good people.
Retain. Yeah.
And the employees themselves are saying, well, gosh, like last year I had $100 wellness spending account and now it's $5.
I want to break that down a little bit further. Like as an HR person in a startup or in an organization, even if it's like a franchise, like McDonald's or Cobb's Bread. What I appreciate about what you said and how I understand that is that if I could say that we have a great benefits program, which includes great vision, great health, and then on top of that, a wellness account or whatever the value proposition, whatever the product or service or offering is, I could build that into my narrative and my story as I'm recruiting out in the market. And not only that, if I can create a good experience for one employee and they are at a dinner party or at a bar and they're talking about, oh, I have to go to work tomorrow, and they're excited, and like another person or another friend working at another company says, well, why are you so excited all the time to go to work? Well, not only is like I love what I do, I love making bread, I love serving people, I love
Right.
doing my work, but then they also take care of me, right? Like my benefits are great, like I've looked at other places, it's not that great. It is that, like, making that person an advocate and a consistent advocate, because it's over a longer period of time. That consistency and that story is like a consistent story that I could say over a long period of time. And again, it's another recruitment tool or attraction tool.
Yeah, that's bang on.
Yeah.
So that's why I'm excited as an HR person.
So now if I might, I'll answer Nick's question. So I want to go back to it. What's the secret? What's the secret? It's so good. Okay. So most, we call them plan sponsors. They know themselves as employers, have been conditioned to believe that all of their benefits with the same provider is a good idea. So a huge part of the market, the majority of the one store at a time.
You know what?
All right.
I'll be able to edit this, but you are breaking up a little bit, Jeffrey. So maybe you could just restate that and just back it up a little
Sure.
bit. Yeah.
So let me make sure that we're on site here. So most plan sponsors have been conditioned to believe that having all their benefits with the same provider is a good idea. So they go to the big three, which is Canada Life, Sun Life, Manulife, right? And I call them a single source provider. They have a single source of goods, which is the products that they supply. And so generally, when you're with a single source provider, you're going to have a renewal every year. And you're usually faced with two choices at renewal, and usually both of them are bad. So choice one is accept an incremental increase at renewal, and insurers like to keep them kind of under double digits. So let's say 9%. Or conduct a marketing exercise, and God forbid we have to move. Because Mehdi, you know, having been at a bunch of Fortune 500s, moving from one single source provider to another is a 12-month nightmare, right? It's just, there's going to be problems. It creates all kinds of issues. Okay. So what's the difference between a single source provider and a multi-source provider? A single source provider is an insurance company, and a multi-source provider is a third-party administrator. Okay. There's not a lot of difference between the two. For example, they both bill the employer directly. They both provide customer service directly. They both outsource all kinds of stuff like claims payment, right? They outsource value adds. But where it starts to get differentiated is in the case of the single source provider, an insurer doesn't have access to other insurers' products, whereas a multi-source provider does. So the number of insurers on a single source provider that you can have access to is one. Whereas under a TPA, for example, our TPAs, we might have a dozen providers, right? And so that's where things start to get interesting. So insurers themselves are TPAs. It's just that they only have one source of product. And employees.
Oops, you froze.
I'm excited.
Um,
Oh, we
Whoa,
lost you for a
you
second.
froze for about 10 seconds.
Yeah.
Darn. Okay, I'm trying to make sure I'm on the right Wi-Fi. So an employer can go to market through two approaches. One is direct to the insurance companies themselves, or they can go to those same insurers through a third-party administrative procurement machine. And so once we get any sized client onto a third-party administrator procurement apparatus, they can go to the same insurers anytime they want for any reason for any line of benefits. And so what this does is it changes the power dynamic from the supplier to the buyer. And
Right.
that's the secret. And that's why I've put the power into the hands of all of my clients through third-party administration procurement, as opposed to jumping from, one insurer to the next over time.
That's what I
Yeah, I want to replay that.
Yeah.
And again, like just from a very practical perspective. And again, like I when I'm speaking, I always want to speak to like my HR partners or that small business owner, like in my client who is like, 50 employees or maybe even 5 employees. And so what I heard you say is that if I'm an employer and I believe that there is something better for my people, based on what I'm currently spending, I call my benefits broker or my third party administrator, and I just ask them what's out there for me, and they'll go out, shop on my behalf, and be able to tell me what it is and how much it might cost, so I can at least budget that in and figure out, maybe can't afford that today, but I have aspirations that if I hit, like 4 million, 24 million, or $100,000 in revenue, I can afford this for my people.
Right.
So it's what I'm hearing you say is that whether I'm an HR person, a manager, or a business owner, or a finance professional in, working on behalf of my people, I can pick up the phone and call my benefits partner, my TPA, my third party administrator, and they'll be able to do something like this for me.
Yeah, imagine you get a renewal let's say and think about the building blocks of an employee benefits plan. You've got your health, your dental, your drugs, your vision, your life, LTD, AD&D, critical illness, and anything else I can think of. Now, what if at renewal under a single source provider, the life portion has a 50% increase, but everything else is zero? You're most likely to stay with that single source provider and just eat the 50% increase. If we're under a third party administrator, Nick might say, hey, Jeff, do me a favor, just take that life benefit out to 12 life insurers, would you? And so I come back and guess what? The market's hungry. And so instead of a plus 50 on life, I might get a -2, right? I can just, with one signature, change the life provider to another insurer, and there is zero disruption to Nick's client. And so all the client has to do is sign a little thing. The bill's the same, the provider's the same, the administrator's the same, the customer service provider is the same. We've just changed the insurer from one insurer for life and kept every other provider the same. And
That's
so
magic.
this is what changes the procurement dynamic for our buyer, our employer. And so rather think about the alternative is Nick goes, well, gosh, so we're going to leave them because this is insane. And so they've got to pick up their 75 employees and move from a single source provider to another just because of that life rate. And so the elegance of the procurement and the movement changes, and the power dynamic moves to the buyer. And that's when I go back to well, why were we successful? And it's because we put our clients' interests first. And that's one of the secrets is the procurement dynamic change in TPA. And we do that all the time. So another big one is if you're a 100 employee group and you're buying from one of these monolithic insurers, right? You're a tiny, tiny little kayak in a massive ocean. But if you're now plugging in your 100 employees to the buying power of the third party administrator who might have literally hundreds of millions of dollars with those insurers, you're now buying into the power of the relationship, right? So you're getting a little bit of leverage as opposed to being that tiny little buyer who is kind of irrelevant to the supplier.
The flip-flop is very powerful, and they're writing the checks, right? So isn't it nice to put the power back in? I've always said the person who writes the check has the power, but when it comes to a single source provider, it's not always the case. Whereas if you flip it into the TPA, you give that power back to the writer of the check. So
now, how versed are you guys on administrative services only under health and dental?
I am, but that's probably a different language for many.
It's a very different language. Yeah.
Yeah.
So when you're buying your groceries from the insurance stores, they kind of come in two flavors. You got what I call consumptive things, like all three of us are wearing glasses. We consume those every 2 years, right? Then we go to the dentist every 9 months, hopefully, and some of us have prescription drugs every 90 days. We consume those things. Those are what we call experience rated part of our spend as the employer. And then we have these scary things over here, like life, LTD, travel, accident.
Risky stuff.
Risky stuff that is fortuitous and unknown. Okay. And so insurers like to bill those two things kind of under the same funding model. Whereas they say, well, we're going to give you a fully insured life product. We're going to give you a fully insured health product. And so what we have found over time is that it makes sense to split them and buy them differently. And so on the one hand over here, we will find the lowest cost provider for the scary things, the risky things like life and LTD and travel, because they're quite commoditized now, right? And we can I just got a 48-month rate guarantee on a life and LTD case, meaning my next renewal on those benefits is going to be in the year 2029 or 2028. Talk about aligning interest.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, I'll see you in 2028. I'm going to focus on growing my business.
Yeah.
Okay. And then we look at this health and dental and we go, well, why would I pay a premium for health and dental that the insurance company guesses what my consumption would be? Why wouldn't I just pay for my consumption plus a fair administrative fee? And on that side, we call that, we're just going to pay for our administrative services only.
Okay.
And our claims. And so we call that ASO. And so in almost every case, ASO is in the employer's interest over time. You
Yeah.
might beat an insurer 1 year on your health and dental claims might exceed your premiums, but guess what happens on your renewal? The premium goes whoop
Yeah.
on drugs, dental, or vision. And so we work with the finance team to set realistic budgeted administrative services only rates for health and dental over time. And then if there's a difference between their budgeted premiums and their claims, instead of donating that to the insurance company, the employer gets to keep it as
Yeah.
what we call a retained surplus. And so the thing about the small market on a single source provider is the insurers don't like to do that. So they'll say to Nick, listen, man, you can't do ASO on any group less than 300 employees or whatever their
Right.
number might be. And Nick, whatever you're hearing these days.
Yeah, some of them, some of the smaller TPAs will do 50.
TPAs
Yeah.
are different, but what
They
do you
are
hear?
different. Insurers, I think Manulife will do like 100
Mhm.
ASO for, but you need at least 100 lives. So
Yeah.
And so that was the point I was going to make, is that TPAs, you have access to funding models in the small marketplace that you don't have in the single source provider.
correct. Yeah.
And
For sure.
what like, I mean, what I feel and what I'm observing is that we have all these small organizations based on the numbers that we just talked about
Yep.
that have 30 employees, 40 employees, 50 employees, but have aspirations of becoming 70 to 80, or they usually have an outsourced model around headcount. And so they'll have like a core 30 employees, but then have, almost 150 contractors.
Wow.
Those core 40 employees will never get a good benefits package, right? And so some companies are saying, I'm not even going to bother with the benefits program. I have one company that just says, like, I'd rather pay it out front, each person pay for their own dental, pay for that, and then we'll reimburse them, or even just pay them more.
Yeah.
Bother with benefits.
You
Right?
hear that, very tax inefficient, but
Yeah.
you're just sending wads of money to Revenue Canada.
Especially startups where you have young people who for the most part, don't really see the value of the benefits plan.
True.
And so
Until they need it, right? Like, until someone says, oh, I need braces. And then all of a sudden they're like, oh, you only cover like whatever, $500 or $1,000 of it.
or
That's
disability.
you get really frustrated employees. And, and then when, a big employer like Google or whoever says, oh, tech employee, you want to come here? We'll give you all this cool stuff. We lose them right away, right? And especially that's what's going on in GTA, in Waterloo, Kitchener, where you have all these amazing tech companies. Employers are only employing only 30 to 50 people.
Yep.
And that's why you're getting all this transient workforce that's leaving. So to hear that I have some economies of scale, some power, if I group it with other, organization, or with a TPA that has access to other administrations and has buying power, I want to compete against Google. I want to compete against, Intuit, who have these amazing benefits programs, but, I can't compete with them.
You can.
Well, now you're giving me an option now that I can. Yes.
Yeah. We like to, and so best practice number 7 in my world is benchmarking.
Yeah.
And so, because we're huge, and we have tens of thousands of clients, I'm able to see what Silicon Valley's doing. I'm able to see what startups are doing, and I'm able to connect the dots on the benchmarking side to say, listen, we're going to walk before we run, but we're going to set up like Google set up.
Yeah.
So that when we, God forbid, become Google, right? Then we're going to be structured for success as we grow and scale.
Yeah. Cool.
And so benchmarking is a big part of the best practices.
I get asked that, and I also, when I help people design plans, I say, well, this is just something I do, but let's not over offer, because if you ever have to take things away, they don't like that. But when you add something, everybody goes, yes, that was very exciting. So yeah.
Well, what I've been doing to serve that, Nick, is what I call new flex. And so, what old flex used to be, every Jan 1, we would ask our employees to sort of make a determination on what they wanted with flex credits. and it was wildly complicated. It led to rising costs for employees, and it was confusing. And so then they invented something called modular flex, which was, well, we'll give you gold, silver or bronze, you pick. And nobody knew what to do, so they all picked bronze, right? And again, that was it, something employees had to do every year, and it was confusing and complicated. New flex is allocating flex spending dollars through healthcare spending accounts and through wellness accounts, where there is no decision to be made on any date. The employee can spend it on any eligible expense they want under the CRA 365 days a year. And old folks can use it for things on the consumptive side to cover deductibles and copays. And young folks can be more discretionary and buy nice glasses like Medi's wearing right now, because they don't have anything else to spend it on, maybe braces, right? Yeah. And so I love the idea of new flex, and we're seeing that in the startup community in tech, where to Nick's point, which is a really good one, well, this year, let's just give a little bit on our, we call it a defined contribution. So finance is super happy. And once it's gone, it's gone. HR is happy because now it's unlimited in terms of what it can be used for. And employees are happy because they can spend it on whatever they want, and they can change their mind every day of the year. And so we talk about aligning interest. New Flex is doing that.
Cool. One of the things I add sometimes to that, and it goes over well, not with everyone, is I say, okay, we're going to create a plan like that, the healthcare spending account, and the longer you stay, the more you get.
Love it.
So it rewards longevity. Now, I have had pushback, which was funny. I was thinking about this the other day. Somebody said, no, we want to treat everyone the same.
Right.
And I should have said, do you pay everyone the same? but I didn't. I said, okay, if you want to treat everyone the same, that's fine. But here's a strategy that rewards longevity. So when they like it. So
I first off, Jeff, it's been amazing having you like in education, like as a business person, and then as an HR person, then a person like that's, worked with franchisees, corporations, and, proprietors that are either looking to scale or just, operating and happy. But what an education in terms of this one cost that I have every single year, and how can I start thinking and getting a little bit more out of that, and again, meet the needs of me as a finance person, if I'm an individual business person, yep. But the financer or finance specialist in my organization, the HR specialist in my organization, who might be me as well. And then thinking about my employees that come in every single day and try to take care of my customers and my clients.
Well, I've got two more because I haven't finished answering Nick's question about.
Oh, cool.
What's the special, what's so special about TPA? So there's two more little tricky things that people don't really think about that sort of shake themselves out over time. So one is product options. The single source provider only may have a few opportunities for their travel coverage or their stop loss coverage, right? Or whatever else. And under a TPA, we have almost unlimited product options. So we're not limited by our provider's choice. We have almost an unlimited market choice, and that can be really critical in areas like stop loss, right, or out of country. And so that's kind of a hidden value. And then the other one is the value adds themselves. So you think about it, you're stuck with a single source provider, and they have a really nice set of value adds that the employees have grown accustomed to, right? Maybe usually it's around wellness and employee assistance and those sorts of things. If you leave the single source provider and go to another single source provider, you lose all the value adds. And so it's a little bit of a web, right? And strategically so. Whereas the TPA provides the value adds, and we switch any one of our providers, the value adds stay the same to the employer. And that's back to my aligning interests, is the employees may have fallen in love with the wellness program or the employee assistance program or the whatever. And if that doesn't mean we can't just change a life provider, an LTD provider, or a health or dental provider. And so we can have that continuity of the provider through the TPA. Go ahead, Nick.
Yeah, no, I had nothing. Sorry for that. I was just, go ahead, keep going.
Yeah. So, and the last one is what I call the trap. And so this doesn't happen a lot, but I've seen it now happen a dozen times, where one of your employees gets a super high recurring drug claim and you're with a single source provider, okay, you can never leave that provider because all the other single source providers will ask for an EP3 certificate and they will decline to quote. And so what the incumbent does is they say, well, we know you can't leave, so we're going to increase rates on the other parts of our program. Whereas if you're under a third-party administrator and you happen to get that high claimant under your one health benefit, you can move all the other benefits anytime you want. And so for that reason, Mehdi, I like to get my folks set up on the TPA. Jack Welch said, change before you have to. You remember that book?
Yeah.
And you did your MBA, so you probably read that one. And so this is why I set all my clients up for success in the future, so that if they do have that high claimant, we don't have to worry about the fact that we're stuck with our single source provider until either that person is off our plan or
I know, it's called planning.
Yeah.
No, and it's funny. I was in a conversation today. We had a networking meeting because I'm talking about drug diversion plans because I do have a client with, and they've got one person when it's Stellara, and it's like $60,000 a year to enjoy that bio drug. So it can be tricky. And I think just to recap, the one thing that I know I really like about the TPA model is this ability to just kind of take one piece out and just switch it without switching everybody. The power of that and being able to control the checkbook, feel like you've got the power back is really key. I'd like to, have you covered everything you'd like to today, Jeffrey? Yeah.
Never, but
Never. Okay.
Well,
I
I do have
that.
one question. It's just like a practical one. Like, so if I'm, right now I'm an HR rep at an organization and, I'm already locked in with someone, right? And I'm not trying to cause mass chaos and have everybody call you. And that's not what we're trying to do. We're not soliciting business. But like, if I do want to explore this, or if I'm, in an organization where we don't have HR and I'm the controller or the sole finance person, or if I'm a business person right now and I have none of these people and I'm quite intrigued about this, but I do know that I have a great benefits rep who's always helping me and I've been with them the last 3 years. What questions should I be asking, if I'm calling them, calling that benefits rep that would, allow me to start exploring what options I have?
That's a really good question. So what Nick would do, and I would do to help him is first of all, every employer should know that they are only encumbered by a 30-day termination clause on their group benefits. So a lot of employers think that they have to terminate on renewal, and that's just not true.
Okay.
So if you find a good option for your firm, all you need to do is give a 30-day written notice to your provider, and you can leave anytime you want, all 12 months a year. And so generally what we like to do rather than disrupt the operations is we do something called a best practices audit. And so we say to the employer, well, tell you what, why don't we look at your good governance through the lens of the 10 best practices. All right. And we're going to provide an auditing report that you can use to have a good conversation with your consultant. And one of those is going to be procurement. All right. So I'll just list them for you. So the first best practice is funding models, which we talked about, separating your health and dental from your scary benefits. The second one is risk management. Like how can we, Nick talked about, planning and how can we ensure that we don't get stuck in that high claims trap. The third is procurement and administration, which we've beaten to death on this chat, right? In a good way. And then we go to wellness, service level guarantees, the value adds that are possibly provided to you, benchmarking against your future competition and current competition, the disability best practices, both short and long, your reporting, and what headaches does that create for you right now, and how can we make that go away? And then finally, and most importantly, employee engagement and communication. And so, that takes Nick or I a week, right? It's not like we're going to market or anything. We're just looking at best practices and good governance. And then that report becomes a really compelling document whereby we're seeing all kinds of areas for financial savings, increasing benefits, neutralizing, stabilizing our costs over time, using those saved dollars to reinvest into the program. Then you make your decision. You say,
Right.
well, maybe we should move to this procurement idea of third-party administration. Today is January, what is it, the 18th? Maybe we'll move in April. Maybe we'll move in May. And so we have to go back to the business strategy. We don't want the benefit strategy driving the business. We want the business
And
strategy.
that's the most important thing that I wanted to make sure, like, equipping my peers, my other HR peers or business peers, that, like, that audit in itself is like sometimes eye-opening, either in a bad way or a good way, to say, you know what, we're doing pretty good right now. Maybe I need to just re-communicate this and increase my usage, because we already have a great product or a great offering for my people. Or it starts eye-opening, and again, like, it helps me plan for 2025, because I know this year is going to be a tough year, but at least, in the future, and I know that I have 30 days to be able to make this change, but I know I'm working towards something. So I love that. Thank you.
Yep. No, great question.
Cool. Well, I think we got a lot. I know.
I think we got a lot.
Yeah, and my mind's going as an HR person and as a business person. So, Jeffrey, thanks so much for being here today.
Pleasure.
And I'm sure we're gonna have a lot more questions for you. So we'll hang out with you later this year for sure.
I look forward to it.
But in the meantime, again, thanks so much for your time, and then also breaking down this really scary topic. In the beach ball of business, like, this is one stripe on that ball of business.
Yep.
But it's a very important one, and it separates us from other employers. So yeah, thanks again.
Yes,
Right.
no. Yeah, I really appreciate your time. I think this is great. I might end up even having to cut this into two, so we'll see what happens. It's a good it's good. It's great. It's a ton of information, and very, very helpful. So again, I thank you very much for your time.
All right, gentlemen. Good to meet you both, and we'll see you next time.
Okay, good. Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thanks for listening to the Your Talent Matters podcast. If you found value in today's episode, please share it with others. Be sure to subscribe wherever you heard this podcast so you never miss a future episode. For more information or to connect with your hosts, you can visit their website, yourtalentmatters.ca. Thanks again for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.